Over the course of the last week, Republicans like Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham have been trying to convince you that Brett Kavanaugh is a victim. It's not Christine Blasey Ford who's the real victim, it's actually Brett Kavanaugh. In fact, Trump was so adamant about the fact that Brett Kavanaugh was the real victim here that he decided to go on national television and publicly apologize to Brett Kavanaugh on behalf of the nation.
On behalf of our nation, I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering you have been forced to endure. Those who step forward to serve our country deserve a fair and dignified evaluation, not a campaign of political and personal destruction based on lies and deception. What happened to the Kavanaugh family violates every notion of fairness, decency, and due process. Our country, a man or a woman, must always be presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. And with that, I must state that you, sir, under historic scrutiny, were proven innocent. Thank you.
I mean, I can't help but think, after watching that we are truly in the stupidest timeline. I mean, this is just... I don't know how else to describe this situation. We're witnessing pure madness, folks. Pure madness. Now, first of all, nothing was proven. I don't get why Republicans are trying to equate the confirmation process to a criminal trial. This wasn't a criminal trial. There were no charges against Brett Kavanaugh. This was a job interview, essentially, and if he wanted to clear his name, well, maybe he should have unequivocally stated his support for an FBI investigation, which is something that an innocent person would likely do. But instead, he dodged questions about whether or not he'd support that, and when we finally got an FBI investigation, President Donald Trump placed limits on the FBI, so it couldn't do much, and then we learned that he actually allowed them to expand the investigation, only to later find out that regardless if that was true, the FBI still didn't really do much. They didn't speak with key witnesses like Christine Blasey Ford and Kavanaugh himself, and when the results were finally released, even United States senators only had 5 minutes each to look at one physical copy of the FBI's report. So absolutely nothing was proven. This was not a criminal trial. There were no charges that a prosecutor filed against Brett Kavanaugh. A jury didn't rule that he's innocent and acquit him. This was not a trial. This was a job interview, an interview for a promotion more specifically. And if you think he was treated poorly, and he's the true victim here, well, for a victim, turned out pretty well for him, right? Because he's now sitting on the Supreme Court as we speak. Now, to be fair, you can argue that maybe it was the case that Brett Kavanaugh was proven innocent in the court of public opinion, but even that isn't really correct because most Americans oppose Kavanaugh's confirmation, and a majority of the country believes that Christine Blasey Ford is credible. So even by that standard, his innocence was not proven. But the most outrageous part, I think, about all of this is that as Trump sat there and apologized to Kavanaugh and painted him as the victim and talked about how his life was ruined by these accusations, well, it's still the case that Christine Blasey Ford is not able to return home due to death threats that she's still receiving from people that buy into this notion that Brett Kavanaugh is the real victim here. And my question is whether or not Donald Trump is also going to apologize to Christine Blasey Ford. I mean, after all, it was Donald Trump himself that called her allegations credible just a week ago.
I thought her testimony was very compelling, and she looks like a very fine woman to me. Very fine woman. But certainly she was a very credible witness.
Well, if she's credible, then why not apologize to her publicly on behalf of the nation as well? For everything that she went through. For everything she's still going through. She literally is unable to return home, and according to her lawyers, she's not going to be able to return home for the foreseeable future because people who support you believe this idea that Brett Kavanaugh is the one who was harmed through all of this. It's not like it was traumatizing for her to relive that experience in front of everyone in the country watching. It's Kavanaugh who's the victim. So are you going to take into account what she's been through and apologize to her? Well, of course not, because after Donald Trump said that she's credible, he went on to mock her at a rally in Mississippi.
I had one beer. Well, do you think it was? Nope, it was one beer. Oh, good. How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. What neighborhood was it in? I don't know. Where's the house? I don't know. Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know. But I had one beer. That's the only thing I remember. And a man's life is in tatters. A man's life is shattered.
A man's life is shattered. Unbelievable. I think Brett Kavanaugh is going to be okay. Maybe that's a jump, but he's serving on the Supreme Court as we speak. I think he's going to be okay. In actuality, a woman's life was shattered because that woman is still unable to return home. That woman was traumatized and survived an attempted rape, and then she was mocked by the president, only to see that same president who once called her credible days earlier apologize to the man that allegedly tried to rape her. I mean, you want to talk about a life being shattered. Christine Blasey Ford put everything on the line, and that shattered her life. And guess what? She didn't even get justice. I mean, imagine how difficult it would be to admit that on national television. But she did it anyway. She put it on the line so the American people can learn about the true Brett Kavanaugh, and so she'd maybe get justice. But she got nothing out of the situation. She only got punished. And when Donald Trump explained why he thought it was necessary to mock her after calling her credible, well, his reasoning is absolutely absurd.
And some people said that you were extremely unkind to Christine Ford. But what was it that got you to pivot from your restraint about her and to fight for Kavanaugh at that point?
Well, there were a lot of things happening that weren't correct. They weren't true. And there were a lot of things that were left unsaid. And I thought I had to even the playing field.
He had to even the playing field. Yes, because it's about time that men finally have their voices heard in this country. This is the stupidest timeline. I don't even know what to say about this. Don't even know what to say. Now, as women across the country watched all of this unfold, a reporter asked him, what's your message to women after all of this? Because clearly you can't maintain this facade that the Republican Party even pretends to care about women. So what's your message to all of these women? And his response was, in Trumpian fashion, completely idiotic.
You talked about how this is a moment for young men across the country. You said it was a scary moment. But what is your message today to the women across this country who are feeling devastated, feeling like the message that's been sent here is that they're not being...
I don't think they are. I think actually that women, if you look at the biggest fans, and I can tell you that the people that spoke to me most, just really in the strongest of terms, were in his favor were women. You have a lot of women that are extremely happy, a tremendous number of women, because they're thinking of their sons, they're thinking of their husbands and their brothers and their uncles and others.
That's how I feel whenever I hear Donald Trump. Look, I think he's getting stupider. You know how whenever a president is sworn in and then 4 or 8 years later, you can really see the toll that being president took on them. They just age so rapidly. Trump isn't necessarily aging rapidly, but I think he is becoming more stupid. The presidency is definitely having that effect on him because he doesn't really look any older. He still looks just as orange and disgusting as he did when he was sworn in, but I think he's actually getting stupider. What a stupid statement. I mean, he doesn't like the facts of the situation, so he imposes his own worldview so he can sleep better at night. Oh, women aren't mad at me. They're excited. Actually, they're some of the most excited people about Brett Kavanaugh. I mean, what a joke. Now, even though we all expect, reasonable people expect Donald Trump to say idiotic things, well, it still matters what he says, because what the president says matters. During the Me Too era, when women are finally speaking out and telling their stories, Donald Trump is trying to say, well, actually, it's the men who are the victims. He's trying to flip it. And this is catching on among his base. And there's an example of this. So in a since-deleted viral post, one mom said this about her son: "This is my son. He's a gentleman who respects women. He won't go on solo dates due to the current climate of false sexual accusations by radical feminists with an axe to grind. I vote. #him too." Now, this is the general perception that a lot of MAGA cultists have of the situation. During this Me Too era, they're believing that it's actually the men who are the real victims here. Now, are false accusations a thing? Of course they're a thing. It happens. But what they're refusing to realize is that only 2 to 10% of the time are those accusations of sexual misconduct actually false. But instead, Donald Trump is getting all of his sycophantic loyalist followers to believe that actually it's men who are the victims in this situation. And even if it's the case that false accusations do occur, well, generally, black men are actually the ones more likely to be falsely accused of being guilty. And this expands beyond sexual misconduct allegations. If Donald Trump was being honest and actually did in fact worry about due process and the presumption of innocence, he'd be speaking out against the deaths of Philando Castile and Tamir Rice. But I mean, that doesn't hit close to home for Donald Trump because they're black and he's racist. And since he has, 14, 15, 16 accusers himself, he desperately needs you to believe that when women come forward and tell their stories, they're lying, because that's something that benefits Donald Trump. Now, going back to the mom of a Navy son who apparently doesn't want to go on solo dates because he's so worried about false accusations, that story was made up. That guy's name is Peter Hansen, and he tweeted this out: "That was my mom. Sometimes the people we love do things that hurt us without realizing it. Let's turn this around. I respect and believe women. I never have and never will support #him too. I'm a proud Navy vet, cat dad, and ally. Also, Twitter, your meme game is on point." And when he talks about Twitter's meme game, he's referring to people who memed his mom and mocked her post relentlessly. It was pretty hilarious, and I'm glad that he kind of took it lightheartedly. So this is what right-wingers do. If something is true, they'll say the opposite. And even if people don't believe the opposite, it at least moves the argument a little bit in their direction. But what they're doing is they're imposing victimhood on themselves, not just Donald Trump, but his followers, in order to validate the worldview that Trump tells them is real. Now, after all of this, after mocking Christine Blasey Ford, after getting what they wanted, Trump still had the audacity to accuse the left of being extremists.
You don't hand matches to an arsonist, and you don't give power to an angry left-wing mob, and that's what they've become. The Democrats have become too extreme and too dangerous to govern. Republicans believe in the rule of law, not the rule of the mob.
So let me ask you this, Don. Is the left actually an angry mob, or, according to your conspiracy theory, is the left, who were protesting Kavanaugh, part of an AstroTurf campaign funded by George Soros to make it seem like Brett Kavanaugh and you are more hated by Americans than you are in actuality? I mean, look, this is a conspiracy theory that's convenient for Donald Trump and MAGA cultists because, again, it validates their worldview. They don't care about facts. They don't care about reality. They care about their feelings. They put feelings over facts. So if you're one of the individuals who worship Donald Trump as if he's a god, one of the individuals that called me a cuck or a soy boy, you're never going to be convinced. You're too far gone. If this doesn't show you that Donald Trump and the Republican Party don't care about women, then absolutely nothing will convince you of that. You're too far gone.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.